everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the New Homes podcast. I'm here today with the design historian, Professor Deborah Sugg Ryan.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm also here with editor of Show House magazine, Rupert Bates.
Hi, Sonal.
So today we'll be talking all about the history of homes, what a dream home looks like, as well as what kind of future trends to expect. So Deborah, let's start off with you. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Professor of Design History at the University of Portsmouth, and I write books about the history of the home. I've also made television programmes and radio programmes as well about houses.
Fantastic. And Rupert, I know we've had you on the show before, but for some of our newer listeners, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, hi, Sonal. I'm a property journalist, editor of a magazine called Show House, which is very much about house builders and new homes. And we also run a new homes portal called whathouse.com.
Fantastic. So, Deborah, let's start off with where your fascination for homes actually came from.
Yeah, well, I moved house a lot as a child. My parents were an RAF family, so we moved from house to house to house. But also I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and one of the things they loved doing was visiting show homes.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I think it really came from there.
Yeah, mine goes back actually to local reporter days. The editor turned to me and said, "Rupert, your father's an estate agent. You can write the property column." There was more work, no more money. So yeah, I wasn't too happy to start with, but then it meant going around seeing fabulous houses from across the periods, and I got hooked on housing and have been writing about houses ever since.
Fantastic. So a house like this that we're sat in right now at our Hendricks Green development, what would this look like 100 years ago?
Yeah, 100 years ago is really where we get lots of our ideas of home at the moment. This is the point where there was a big house building boom in Britain following the First World War, and people started to become homeowners on a mass scale. So the kind of house that emerged is the 3-bedroom, semi-detached house in a suburban location, because it gives you the best of rural and urban with a garden. And really in a kind of arts and crafts style. So it connects with the British past, but also as well talks a bit to its locality. It might use local materials in its construction.
I think it has come full circle in that sense, and I think this is a classic example of arts and crafts 100 years on, but obviously overlaid with modern technology, modern furnishings, etc., but without losing sight of the core of the arts and crafts movement, which is the look, the feel, the natural materials, the local materials. So I think you've actually crossed the 100 years very nicely here, and I think this is an epitome of a modern home, obviously, but very much doffing its cap to some wonderful architecture and building techniques of old.
But the interior, of course, would look quite different 100 years ago. So we wouldn't have had this sort of semi-open plan arrangement 100 years ago. We would have had 2 reception rooms, one at the front of the house, usually for best, the parlour, the rear reception room as a living room come dining room, and maybe a small galley kitchen and a single bathroom upstairs or perhaps downstairs to save costs, whereas of course the ideal now is to have far more bathrooms and preferably en suites. So the exterior may be quite similar 100 years ago, but the interior was very different.
Absolutely, and just touching on bathrooms and toilets specifically, they used to be outside to then being brought into the house to then either upstairs or downstairs, but then attached to the bedroom and en suites.
Yeah. I mean, the bathroom is certainly one of the things that has been a major change. And in actual fact, it tended to be the people that lived in new houses that had the indoor bathrooms, but lots of people in older properties would have had the privy at the bottom of the garden or maybe at the end of the rear return, but they'd still have to go outside the house to access it. And sometimes in the cheaper end of the market, bathrooms would be built downstairs to save a bit of cost. But the upstairs bathroom, and of course now our ideal is the ensuite, and it's really common now to perhaps have even more than one ensuite in a house.
Absolutely, and our lifestyle range comes with an ensuite per bedroom, and I think Rupert, you've probably come across it and seen that people want to have this as an option as families are growing older and people are probably staying at home.
Absolutely. Bathrooms, I think, are very interesting because, from just being purely functional and hygiene and washing, it's now you have that luxury bathroom that it has to offer so much more. It's actually a place of sanctuary. So I think it's very important to create, you can create something really cool in a bathroom space. Definitely.
And just touching on the pandemic and how trends have changed over the last, let's say, decade, would you say that's what people want? What kind of things are people looking for in their new dream homes?
Yeah, technology's moved into the bathroom. It's moved throughout the home, that was happening pre-pandemic. But I think it's the practical issues of what technology can now do is very important. But not to the point of overtaking a home. I think we can get slightly obsessed at the moment with modern technology. And I think the great thing about a home is that it should remain a home. And whilst automation and tech are great, I think it's about the lifestyle that you can create in the home, the feel that it is a proper house to live in, not just a series of apps interconnecting.
And I know we just talked more about inside the home, but what about the fifth room of the home? And obviously you were on the outdoor living episode, but how can we utilise that space? And are we seeing that as more of a trend? Probably a question for both of you, I guess, really.
Yeah, I think that idea of bringing the outside in is really important. So we've had that fashion for bifold doors for quite a long time, and that lovely sort of seamless integration where you can open the doors and you'll maybe have some hard landscaping and it's all on the same level so that you can, and it's brilliant for entertaining and everyday living as well. So that, I think, is definitely a trend. And of course, we're all very mindful now of ventilation. So I think this is we're never going to get away from coronavirus. So one of the things I think is brilliant is that integration of outdoors and indoors that will keep us safe. But also, I think loads of people have got into gardening and houseplants and are connecting with nature. And if we think of the cottagecore trend in interiors, which is all about nature as well, and the colours of nature too. So I think gardens are going to be increasingly important.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think that outdoor space, it's almost thinking beyond the bifolds now, isn't it? Which, Redrow do brilliantly, and I think it's a great opportunity to continue that trend. And I think it was happening pre-pandemic, but as you say, it's that essence of the fifth room in the house, rather than just the garden being a separate entity. It's actually very much part of the living space. And we get a bit hooked up on the British weather. But I think you can create some really cool outdoor space for dining areas, entertaining areas, amenity areas. And also, as Deborah's saying, actually, you're almost in many ways literally bringing the outside in, aren't you, in terms of colours and tones and earthy tones and wood and nature. So you almost get that interconnection so that they are almost seamless.
And if we go back to indoors and open plan living, how did you see that evolve in the British housing market today?
I think open plan has got a really interesting history. So it comes to us from other countries. So I think the British were fairly late adopters. But if you look at, for example, the post-war American home, they really embraced that idea of the open plan dining kitchen way before we did. And lots of people who live in older houses have been busy knocking walls down to create that effect with varying degrees of success. Because I think one of the things that's really interesting is that lots of us have been working from home in the pandemic. And certainly I think hybrid working is here to stay for lots of us. So lots of us will be going into the office maybe only once or twice a week. And of course, if everyone is on a Zoom call and you've got two adults and you've maybe got grown-up children still at home who are working, or you've got the kids coming in from school needing to do their homework, having everything open plan, just from a logistical point of view, is maybe not that sensible. And one of the things I've loved about being on Zoom is you get those peeks into people's houses, and who's in the kitchen, who's in a bedroom, who's in an office. So I wonder if maybe more flexible space is going to be the way that we're heading. So, we've been used to bifold doors leading us outdoors into the garden, but I wonder if we're going to start seeing some increasing use of them indoors so that space can be transformed. And we're sitting in a room here with some bifold doors leading into a conservatory. And I think that's a nice idea of this kind of space that could be opened up for entertaining, but, someone could go and sit in the conservatory and use it as a working space. So I think a sort of flexible open plan seems to me to be a kind of way that we may be going.
I agree, because I think obviously in lockdown people were staring at walls, so imagining knocking them down, not necessarily thinking through what that actually means. Because open plan is, as you say, I mean, it's lovely in theory, but becomes practical. So you need maybe to have open plan, but as you say, sort of zoning and partitions at the right junctures, as it were. Mm-hmm. But it's also interesting what you said about Zoom and technology and working from home. That it's trying to marry, isn't it? That you're trying to create a home that is sort of connected to nature, but then has to be connected to technology. And I think getting that balance right is really important. And
would you say the term is like broken plan?
Yeah, well, yeah, broken plan comes from kitchen design, and there is certainly a trend now in terms of thinking about different zones in the kitchen for different activities, and fitting a kitchen so it is a bit less like that sort of work type kitchen, more like a living room. And you can do that really cleverly with using some things like floor to ceiling larder type cupboards, and so you're breaking up that continuous work surface. And you might have a drink zone in your kitchen in one area, but you might have a zone for something else. There's the idea, lots of us have acquired pets in lockdown, so you might have a pet zone in your kitchen as well, because we need somewhere for all that paraphernalia. So that kind of broken plan idea, I think, is really interesting, but you can start translating it into the rest of the house. So one of the lovely ideas that comes from arts and crafts houses is this idea of little nooks. So you can have a little television nook or a little reading nook, that you could just have these smaller, more intimate spaces off bigger, more open spaces.
Absolutely. I love the term broken plan. I think that's my life, in a nutshell. but I think what's particularly interesting is thinking of new homes. Obviously, the kitchen has always been the hero of the house, isn't it? When you take customers in to show them. But I think what's really interesting, and which the more enlightened house builders are doing, is actually, it used to be, you look at the demographic of the area you're building in, and it's sort of almost, there's an assumption it's one size fits all, and yet those sizes are quite literally changing almost by the day. And I think you've also got the huge influence of social media and people deciding their own trends and what they want. So I think you've got a lot of people walking in. If it doesn't actually suit them or have the flexibility to suit them, maybe that can change that whole purchasing dynamic. So I think it's very important to be flexible and to recognise what's going on out there in terms of the trends, what people are looking at, whether it's colours, layouts, designs, or just response to the pandemic, working from home. There's a myriad of new issues that have to be considered when designing new homes, I think.
We touched on arts and crafts very briefly, so I'm just going to revisit that subject. So our heritage collection is inspired by the arts and crafts movements of the 1930s. So just wanted to check, from your point of view, why do people resonate with that style of design so much?
I think it's really interesting because we've had this fashion for mid-century modern for quite a few years now, and that it comes from Scandinavian interiors and IKEA. But with the whole cottagecore movement, which started as a fashion trend, it's really spread into interiors. And I think there has been a real looking back to the arts and crafts movement in terms of interior trends, as well as it as a kind of timeless exterior style. And I think it's about going back to the past and going back to traditions. And as a design style, it's quite wide-ranging, but one of the things it does is it draws on older traditions from sort of villages, the medieval period. So you get things like the use of local materials. So if you're in Norfolk, you might build in flint because flint is found in Norfolk, or you might build with brick that is specific to that area. And then there are other kinds of things in arts and crafts style that I think just make arts and crafts houses very friendly and welcoming. So that kind of wide-hipped roof, the porch, the lovely windows with the small panes that can be very kind of appealing. And that idea, because compared to the average Victorian house that came before the arts and crafts style, arts and crafts is more open. It's not open plan, but it's open and area and lighter. And then in terms of the interior, the use of wood, particularly wood that is not highly varnished, so things like oak that have this kind of warmth and sort of sensuous feeling.
It's the warm and the welcoming, isn't it? And I think arts and crafts houses, they have a face and a personality, don't they, which maybe some other periods don't necessarily. I mean, every period's got great bits of architecture, and you think of the Georgian symmetry, etc. But there's something about arts and crafts that is, as you say, is timeless, and it's great to see companies like Redrow actually tapping into that, because I think it taps in to the modern feel for what people want. So I think it covers a lot of those bases around what we've talked about earlier in terms of nature, warm materials. Local materials is great as well. Building in the vernacular, I think, is so important.
And it's there now in all the mainstream high street stores. You can go to somewhere like Dunelm and you'll find that kind of cottagecore trend. But I think there's also, it's part of a concern for the environment and sustainability. It's a way of expressing your identity, because maybe you are having a family heirloom, or you're going and buying something in a charity shop or a car boot fair or an auction and mixing it up with some modern things as well. So it's quite fluid too.
That's interesting in terms of almost like young people almost becoming interior designers, which maybe they weren't before. I mean, I just think of myself, you sort of go in and you take what's given, but actually that sense that younger people are actually thinking about what their home could look like, and the fashion of the day, the environmental concern, you're meshing that all together to create some really nice space.
Yeah, and I think people are getting inspiration, obviously, from social media, from Instagram and from TikTok, and they're seeing ideas. And I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating, is it's not just coming from magazines, but I think there's also that idea of curating your home, of bringing these things together, and also thinking about, seeing your home as well through that lens of your Instagram post too. So it's giving you this sort of attention to detail. You might really carefully think about the objects in a little corner because you're going to see them through the lens of your camera phone, aren't you? So
yes.
So I think that kind of trend of sort of bringing different things together, rather than going to IKEA or another store and just buying everything.
Yeah.
You're getting it from here, there and everywhere.
So looking to the future, we've seen home offices have become more popular in our homes, smart tech, that kind of stuff. What would you say are your key trends that you will see coming forward?
Well, I think there are some really interesting things happening in the kitchen. Open plan is here to stay, I think. And I think the kitchen island is still going to be an ideal as well, but we maybe want a feet on the floor eating space as well. So the idea of the kitchen island flowing out into a dining area. But this idea of a flexible, more broken plan space that makes the kitchen really feel like a living room and not just a functional kitchen. So breaking up the units rather than continuous runs. The use of colour can really emphasise that, and texture. And I think colour is something that is really coming into our homes, that we're going away from the grey neutrals. You've got dual colours, but you've also got these colours associated with nature too. And then the use of tech in the kitchen, which not just in terms of smart devices. I think one of the exciting things for me is the idea of guided cooking, that you'll have devices that will teach a kind of recipe to you and you'll cook along with, but also the flexibility. So we know that there are some really exciting developments. Cordless appliances, so you'll no longer have to think about where your sockets are. You can have your appliances anywhere. This is your countertop appliances. But also the surface itself, and one of the things that is here already is an induction surface, so that you won't have to have a fixed hob. You'll be able to have your pans anywhere you want on your kitchen surface. So that again would accommodate different people doing different things at the same time, but also a more flexible kitchen space.
Fantastic. And you, Rupert?
Yes, you can almost take that outside, couldn't you? Because I think outdoor living is very much the future. It's here already, and it's here to stay. And whilst you've got all the tech inside and technical cooking, you've now got the trend and the vogue for outdoor kitchens, and whether that's barbecues and wood-fired ovens, so almost the more elemental cooking of old, outside, connected with nature. So you've actually got those two spaces, and I think bringing the outside in, the inside out is very much the trend of the future and here to stay.
Thank you so much, guys, for being on the episode today.
Thank you very much, Sonal. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you.
Fantastic. It's been so much fun learning more about what a dream home could look like, as well as the future trends expected over the next coming years. Keep up to date with the latest home hacks and blogs and news over on our inspiration section of our website. We've got a great few episodes coming over the next few months, so make sure you like and subscribe from wherever you get your podcast from, and see you next time.